Hello, dear agencies. It's our day today. It's Wednesday, and like every Wednesday, ScandiPWA meets with agencies already working with ScandiPWA, considering or planning to pick it up for their Magento implementations. After our conversation last week, we understood that one of the most urgent things is to help you to figure out local setup. My colleague Alex will share right now in the stream, in the comments, a link to Work in Progress by Alfred for extremely detailed local setup guide for Linux. We are working right now on local guide setup for Mac and also experimenting with Mutagen to make sure that you can work on Mac as comfortably as you work on Linux in terms of file sync, because Magento has a lot of files and it involves a lot of delay in development in Docker environment. Also, after last week meeting, we understood that agencies want to deliver on ScandiPWA, but when they get a project, they are stuck in terms of who will develop my frontend, who will work on React, because it's an alien tech stack to Magento developers. So let's take a look at how do we approach this. Motivation for this conversation, it enters mainstream, and Magento has ready-made theme, ScandiPWA, but we need to customize it, we need to set it up, we need to figure out extending it, and there is a learning curve. And PWA workflow is different. It's a different data journey, for example, so you need to take care of new segments, like, okay, GraphQL, who is GraphQL developer? Google REST API, a lot of stuff. GraphQL, less. It's much more new technology. And what if you hire some React developers or external React team? How do you integrate them into this workflow? How do you define their definition of done? So that's our question. And we want to organize these React guys efficiently with Magento team. So let's look at the environment, app stack where they are working. On the right hand side, it's Magento as we know it. It has a database and backend that may interact with this database. GraphQL server also belongs to Magento. That's what they do since 2.3. And that's our data transport. We send requests to a server. We are getting back responses. GraphQL connects to Magento DB. Then we manage received data in Redux. Our view components in React, they are requesting some, they have some data that belongs to them, and it is requested by React containers through Redux. So these are the moving parts, and while we are pretty clear how to separate Magento backend developers for integration, the big question mark is on the left-hand side and, to some extent on GraphQL. So what happens when we have some new features in the backend and they have to be propagated to frontend? Can we really ask these guys, guys, you just deliver theme and then our backend developers will figure it out? They apparently will, but there will be probably some stress and some quality issues as well, because it's a alien tech stack to them. Sometimes React team might be working remotely and will not even overlap with the backend team, so they cannot debug together and they cannot be how to say, cross-functional Scrum teams that delivers features together. So sometimes we need to decouple, because that's what is the promise, one of the promises of PWA technology, that you can decouple things. You can work separately on the backend and on frontend. So let's explore how do we do it if we work with ScandiPWA. And another round on the risks. So that's what we might have if we do not plan. If we do not plan for this. We change something in backend, it doesn't propagate to frontend. Well, because this particular data doesn't have any resolver, doesn't have any GraphQL resolver, or currently this UI component just has hard-coded data, so there is no even fetch query function to request it. There can be more, maybe it updates, but it doesn't involve a caching layer. So you always request it from the database directly. That's kind of insane, that's just running Magento without cache. So to make sure it works, you have to use standard Magento Xtags, but maybe it's a new feature, you didn't use it, you didn't add it. So we wanna be sure that these cases do not happen, that everything works as expected. We want to be sure that data profiles on backend match those exposed by frontend developers. So let's see how we can enable both teams efficiently. Okay, so we have two solutions here that we want to present you, and hopefully hear some comments. Let me just check if I'm receiving. Move on. If there are no questions or comments so far, here is the first answer of how you can potentially decouple or how to say, make different competence teams work on the same project. So we have some changes, or we have some customizations on the level of database and backend. Because of course, if you just use default ScandiPWA theme and default Magento out of the box functionality, there are no issues. Even if you want to change something on a layout level, React developer does it without intervening with data objects. Just some redesign. There is no issues. Just give task, receive it, check, deploy. Bam, it works. What if we are doing something that involves customization and extending? Well, we have to make sure that these changes, that our front-end team is somehow aware of them. So first step is to define a data schema for them. And that's right in the center, that's a focal point, that's a GraphQL requests and responses. And once we have defined it, we can tell, okay guys, here is the theme. Here are the default features, here are the custom features. For the custom features, we use this data profile, and that's what you may get back requesting this data profile from GraphQL server. And then we are hard coding these responses on the GraphQL server level. So your React team, they develop React View components as usually, React container as usually, and Redux as usually. So they talk to GraphQL server as if this feature is already available, but we're just serving kind of mock data. We just serve mock data from Magento, because maybe we do not have even this table yet in the Magento that has this data, or additional columns, or this data is not yet, or we have the table and columns, but this data is not yet imported from some external ERP system. Well, or maybe admin has to make some actions with this data before it becomes available. But we have a data profile which we agreed will be used to render, to demonstrate, to expose this feature on the front end. So It helps us to do end-to-end simulation. And as a first step, yes, we agree on the data structure, then we place hard-coded response in GraphQL server. And if we need to change it, because sometimes you want to send, for example, an image URL, sometimes you want to send no image. And then we also have to plan for this, right? So we might have several sets of hard-coded data. And once our on the right-hand side database Magento backend part completed, we just override this hard-coded resolver, and no changes to the theme are necessary. Just suddenly, theme starts to get real content. And well, we can see if it doesn't work, then we bring mock data back. We see, okay, now it works, and probably we are sending different data. So what we are sending, you can easily debug GraphQL responses in browser inspection, and then see does it match the data profile, or maybe there is new data type, or less data elements, or there is a data that we did not foresee we would receive. I think one clear benefit, at least for me as a guy who has been running a digital agency for some 16, 17 years, is that the delivery can be boxed, so it can be validated. We can have actually an agreement. So we give it, okay, here is a sample data, that's what you hardcode, and that's a theme, please make it. Okay, I changed something on GraphQL server, so here is, I can set up several data scenarios in my agreement, and if the theme works under all of them, then the work is done, and the teams can work separately. So I can have one team making sure that their response is matching what we have agreed as a data schema, and then front-end team, they have to make sure that once they get what we agreed, they render it correctly and, how to say, according to the design. There is another way, more kind of centered towards the front end, with its pluses and minuses. So in this case, yeah, we have some extensions, we have some modifications on the backend level, but we don't really do anything on a GraphQL server level. We don't hard code there anything. Instead, we hard code stuff on the level of fetch inquiry. So instead of requesting the data in fetch query, we use mock query. Well, the next steps is that we register, we create mock query registry, and instead of placing hard-coded data on the GraphQL server, we place it there. Good thing is that all the arguments, well, whatever you expect to fetch in normal fetch query, you do the same in the mock query, and then when you expect another team to finish their GraphQL implementation, you just change mock to fetch. Well, what is additional effort? For example, if a team has delivered you a theme on React and it works according to your agreement on a mock query level, so sourcing data from mock query registry, the team that worked on backend, well, or some other team, once it's complete, they need to change mock queries to fetch queries. And maybe some of them don't need to be quite changed. Maybe they were just for some test purposes. But again, we are changing and we are checking whether this particular component that uses this particular query is working correctly now. So it may involve a bit more of validation of the result for the React theme. This approach can have its pros if both teams are overlapping and work, debug, deliver features simultaneously. So front-end guys, they don't really need to go to the GraphQL server level to enable them to render the data. So they work on the level of their tech stack, while backend team is taking care of GraphQL, and then like, okay, let's see, can we switch to fetch data? Oh, okay, oh, it's semi-working. Okay, we are debugging, we see some issues. Okay, then we switch back to mock data. Backend team works on making sure that GraphQL resolvers are returning correct data sets, or they are returning correct data sets, but front-end team didn't yet manage to grab them in the, I would say, necessary design. So it's a bit harder to limit the contract because we pretty much have to specify the same we could specify in GraphQL now on the mock registry level. That might be a bit more cumbersome. Conclusions. The data schema is the king because that's how to say common denominator for both sides. Because that's how to say, if we are successfully set it up and we make sure that our backend team is providing correct data according to data schema, and front-end team has been using it in their front-end work, then there will be no surprises when they switch. Data scenario, schema is okay, but we have to put some sample values and to brainstorm on corner cases and on the ranges. Could it be some large data set, small or null, or what if we get some kind of wrong type data? Then we have to choose scenario simulation. So we want to simulate this data on the app level or on the server level. So whether we're using mock query or GraphQL data simulation. Handover format. How do you expect your partner to provide you this thing? In what format? And integration process. Okay, great. We contracted, you delivered, you got paid. What is the process of integration? Once this is clear, then there are good chances that you will have this being done successfully. One more time. Check the link that ScandiPWA user has shared. That's the response to multiple questions of last week for local setup instructions. Now, this is work in progress. It's not yet officially published, but it's still probably like 5 or 10 times more rich than it used to be. Another news for agencies: we have 2 cases when agencies in Scandinavia and Southern Europe were requesting certain regional extensions. Well, we directed them to our partners, and we were very happy to learn that they got such a deal that these agencies who already have like customers and almost developed their own project, so they agree with ScandiPWA partners that they will develop these features for them as a paid service, but with a substantial discount, like up to 50%, and it will be placed as an open source, so both parties will contribute it to the ecosystem and will have an appropriate attribution, showcasing their skills and and competences in building extensions. Meanwhile, we are working on showcasing the extension mechanism and planning a marketplace. The marketplace will feature complete extensions, meaning that it will be not just React frontend, it will be a full functionality. Extending of database, backend, frontend, just like you get used in Magento. So these are some of our news. Some more news are to be shared pretty soon. I hope next week we sign a very interesting agreement that provides a response to questions we are receiving from the beginning of this year. And in April, there will be an e-commerce conference where one of the Fortune 500, an extremely popular media company, will showcase their story of how and why they have chosen ScandiPWA for their replatforming, for their kind of next iteration of their extremely proliferated B2C system. So exciting announcements to come next or within few next weeks. Next week also it will be Alex, whom you know from the community side, who will lead the conversations on Wednesday and Thursday while I will be offline, and then the week after I'm happy to join back. Well, if we don't have any more questions, and we don't, then it's good to say see you later, and please fill in the Google Sheet form with questions if you have any. Good luck with development on ScandiPWA.